Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for this conversation with artists Thomas Gibson and Mario Moore in conjunction with the launch of Mark's new edition, Everyone Should Have One on Their Wall, Sunset. This edition is both a fundraising edition to support NADA's year-round programming and as part of Mark's ongoing project, Everyone Should Have One on Their Wall, which he will talk more about today. The edition was printed in collaboration with NADA member EFA Robert Blackburn Printmaking Workshop, and we would like to thank them for all of their work on this project. Mark Thomas Gibson received his BFA from the Cooper Union and his MFA from Yale. He is represented by NADA Gallery Members M+B Los Angeles and Loyal Stockholm and Frederickson Fraser in New York. He was recently awarded a Hodder Fellowship at Princeton University. Mario Moore lives and works in Detroit, Michigan. Moore received a BFA in illustration from the College for Creative Studies and an MFA in painting from the Yale School of Art. He has also been awarded the prestigious Hodder Fellowship at Princeton University and has participated as an artist in residence at Knox College, Fountainhead Residency, and the Joseph and Annie Albers Foundation. If you would like to purchase the edition, we will add a link in the chat to the listing for the edition on our website. If you have any questions during the conversation, please put them in the chat and we'll have a short time at the end for the artist to answer your questions. Thank you again for joining us. And now I'll hand it over to Mark and Mario. Thanks to you both for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Mario.
How's it going, man?
It's going really well today.
So I think, I think we'll first kind of, talk about the print, the reason that we're here, right? That makes the most. I think they may or may not share an image of that. Okay, awesome.
Sure.
So how I wanted to begin the conversation, I really wanted to talk about drawing.
Yeah.
But I think the first thing we should really tackle is a question that I have for you. Mm-hmm. And it's really just kind of looking at the kind of overall print, like as a whole, but like the meaning of it. I think beyond just the first impact you get at looking at the image, right? So I'm looking at your print, and the grave is not one that is kept nice and neat. It is one that people obviously throw trash on. Like I can see a banana, I can see a trash bag. There's a little can maybe of like open tuna or something. Like, so my question is like, as I'm looking at this piece and we're considering past and present, and we're thinking about this horror or this thing in American history, right? Is this a burial, a rush job? Or was it something that took time? And we're seeing, years of labor or years of work later of people throwing trash on it or garbage or kind of disregarding it, right? Because when I think about some way that we care about the people that we bury, right? There's preciousness to it, right? So what's your thoughts there?
Well, that's a lot. That's a lot of questions. I'll try to go on the list. I guess what I was thinking about when I was creating this image, how I was going to develop it, it comes from another painting that I made about a year or so ago, maybe 2 years ago at this point, under a different title. And when I created this image, it just kind of dawned on me. I wanted to see imagery where Klansmen were put through the paces, or where those figures were no longer, well, they're not actually venerated typically when you see them in art, when you actually ever do see them in art. But I wanted to make sure the statement was clear. The feeling and the idea, my intention was extremely clear, almost like deadpan in a way. So by using kind of a caricature or more of a cartoony narrative depiction or mode of depiction, that I was hoping that I could actually attack that quicker, more to the point, using all the tropes and using like elements of all those different distinctions and tropes. But the main thing about this image is that the idea of reproducing it, and seeing it reproduced and creating an image that was simple enough, using a little bit of like cartoony kind of Sunday comic stylization mixed in with a little bit of like, 19th century etching ideas, and just kind of trying to bring about something that I could see live and grow and develop in multiple processes. Yep. So in this print, this first print of this narrative, or of these series of prints that I'm going to make, everyone should want one, or everyone should have one on their wall, is that I want to create an image that I've always kind of I wanted to see in a way. And when I say that, I mean, I want to see a clear stance on the perpetrators of racism. And I wanted to see a clear position against it. And not it to just rely on a Black body doing that work, but to actually have the perpetrator put into their place and their place of rest, maybe. But where I was thinking, so that's really kind of the foundation of it. And then having it be multiple, having it being distributed, having it in different homes, having it in under different stewardship.
And I think what I like I want to get to the the printmaking aspect of it and the kind of circulation, right? Of but like when I'm thinking about the image, I think another thing that I love about it is that you don't know who did the burial, right?
Yeah.
So and I think that's really important, right? I mean, at one point you can say maybe it was a broad public, maybe it's one individual, or maybe it's history itself. I also like the idea of a sunrise, right? Because usually with a sunrise, you're looking to something new. You're looking to a better future. You're looking to
this is a sunset. So in this one, that was also the choice of making it a sunset versus a sunrise. Because I was thinking about like this idea of it opening at one point and having it be like, a type of, originally the print was something a little bit bluer, and it was like a little bit dewier, and it was like a little bit more the idea of like a new beginning. But
right.
But I thought like there's going to be so many interpretations of this, or there's going to be so many modes, or so many different modes I'm hoping to make this object in. Then it wouldn't be kind of interesting, or wouldn't it be kind of bizarre, or wouldn't it be kind of nice to like, let's start at the ending, or like let's start at like the end of the day, as opposed to the beginning of the day.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because when you're thinking about the fall of night, right? We are starting at the end, right? Versus like maybe possibly this is the end, right? Literally, which is of course the concept that I think we're trying to generate, right? Or that you're trying to generate in thinking about this position and thinking about how America views the KKK, views Klansmen as being ever present, even though there were moments in time where the organization was kind of dissipated and then they were kind of resurrected in a way. But I want to come back to that, but I really want to talk about, this idea of an image when we talk about printmaking, something that's able to travel and get into everyone's homes.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about maybe you as a child, like what were did you have any like favorite Sunday newspaper comics that you looked at?
It was weird because I think like as a kid, the Sundays, like the high color, the nice color of like Peanuts, or like, Garfield, or, I think it was like Garfield I kind of was drawn to because he had that kind of attitude to him, and, as a kid, I think that you kind of go towards these characters that have that type of thing that you don't maybe always get to do. It's the only time that you and your parents laugh at the thing that you're not supposed to do. But then, Calvin and Hobbes, of course.
That was mine. Calvin and Hobbes was mine.
Yeah.
It was the idea that like he would blame everything on his very friend. He'd do whatever he wanted, and it was always his fault.
But the inking in that too was just something where it's like I think that work was one of the first times where I felt like, oh, that's what lines can do. And that they can be rough, and they can be sharp, and they can be lean, and they can be fat, and they can do speed, and they can do slowness. And like I also love like the Far Side, but it doesn't have that. It doesn't have all of that. It doesn't move through all those different modes. It's pretty much a setup of characters on a stage, and then an event occurs, and then there's funny text along with it. But to make something where, and it's funny because when I actually just bought the completed edition of all of the comics for Calvin and Hobbes, and the lines were not actually as vivid as I maybe had remembered as a child, but what they inspired in me in mark making, I see it, and I get it, and so when I went back and was looking at that edition, I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of how I do pebbles. That's kind of how I do, rock. And So yeah, that's where a lot of that possibly came from for me.
Yeah, and I think, what's interesting is to take this kind of mode or means of drawing in ink and pull it into a very I don't like using the word political. I mean, we can talk about politics because the clans were actively involved aspects in politics, but
Never. They never dealt with politics. They never got high office.
Dealt with them. How about we say that politicians dealt with them for sure?
Uh-huh.
About the use of your work as being something that's deliberately and actively approaching subject matter that might be some might be really reticent, or something that the Sunday comics wouldn't necessarily tackle, and I think is.
I mean, there was Doonesbury, there was like stuff that, maybe that were a little over my head. I didn't quite understand the Hunter S. Thompson references or something like that in there at the time, but I do think that there were times like in Curtis or definitely in the Boondocks, where politics became, that happens a little bit when I'm, Curtis earlier, but then Boondocks more towards when I'm in my late teens, where you start to actually have people or using that medium in the modern sense, using that medium to do that work. But that stuff would always be there. It'd always kind of be present. It would happen in Peanuts. It would happen in other places where, hippie culture or gender arguments, the little things. I think that if we can kind of go back and look at Peanuts, we might see some of that. But or what roles characters are playing, which is really important in Peanuts. Because I think about Charlie Brown being the outsider always and never truly being, quite right. But yeah, politics as far as print, that is something I've been researching for the last few years. And I got an opportunity to go to Paris 2 years ago, not last year. That didn't happen last year. But I spent my whole time inside of like libraries and just looking at prints and just studying prints and thinking about Honoré Daumier and thinking about, the idea of what a print can do and its act of speaking truth to power, that it can reach so many individuals and be inside of their lives and be inside their homes and connect conversations. And that's why I think about when I make books or when I make anything in the multiple, is that it has this beautiful unifying factor of a conversation and a dialogue.
Yeah, and I think also the importance of drawing out of those, prints. Vincent van Gogh talked about the idea of drawing be the basis. Like, this is something that you have to know, you have to learn. So, and I wanted to ask you, because I know you went to one of those great Miami art schools. You went to New World, right?
Yes, I was a New World kid.
Yeah, you was a New World kid. So, and I know drawing, because there's a lot of talent there. So I know drawing was really important. And I wanted to ask you, like, what was the transition from that to Cooper Union? Like, was it
rough?
Yeah, what was that like? I want to know what that was like.
Wow, that's an interesting thing. No one ever really asked me that in these. It was rough. I was cocky and I didn't know I was cocky. But also I was ignorant. And so I just I had a skill, I had my tools, I had a tool set. I knew I was good at drawing and or drew well. And so I brought that to this space. And then all of a sudden I realized, wait, I'm here with people who basically spent their whole childhood going to the Met and going to the MoMA and going and that their friends or their relatives might be artists, or they, spend their time hanging out with artists outside of school, or they, know where the arts happen inside of the city. Where when I got there, I was like, I'm from South Florida, all of a sudden I don't have a good winter coat. I don't even know. I'd actually never seen snow before. So I was just completely, I was running completely on like fake confidence. And then I remember it was like a week or so in the dorms, and I was hanging out with someone, I think I was hanging out with this person, Se-Young Kim, and they were talking about something in art, and it was just completely over my head. And like, it was language and concepts I had never heard before, and it was like, and I felt embarrassed and I felt scared, kind of, probably. Yeah, I did. And so, but then when we got to the making, and especially when we got to drawing, that's when I felt, oh, okay, I know where I'm at.
Yep.
And then from out of that, I could make a way and I could have a conversation. And then I would sit and I would listen, and I picked up the language and I picked up the lingo, and I figured out who was full of it and who was actually into something and doing something interesting. And you just start to like gauge and you start to understand. But it was a bit of an uphill battle, because at that time, in the program that I was in, they didn't stress art history, and they definitely weren't stressing art history with me in it. So it was like a very antiquated idea, traditional kind of thing that sort of had to get exercised from myself, you know?
Yep. Yeah. And I think what's interesting, because that moment for you was probably my moment coming from undergrad to Yale. You know,
Yeah.
like, I mean, I had a lot of understanding of, you know, Velázquez, all this art history, Western old art,
Yeah.
things like that. And when I got to Yale, I was like, I don't know what you guys are talking about.
Really? I mean, you kept it close to your chest then, because
There was moments, man. There was an amazing moment. Who was it? It was during a crit, right? And everybody was talking, and this one professor, visiting professor, was like, I don't know what the you guys are talking about, but she
yeah,
just called everybody out in the final. And I mean, there was other things, like, because what you, like you said, what happens is, in those environments, you adapt and you learn. You're like, okay,
Yeah.
I know who's talking BS, and I
Yeah.
know who's actually legitly doing something, right, with their concepts. Right.
Well, one thing I didn't understand though, also at the time when I was an undergrad, and I understand it now more as a teacher, is that any given time that you're in a university or in a school setting, you're dealing with the individuals you have. And when you are catering to the conversations that they are bringing up in their work, you find yourself having whatever that stew is with those group of people. And every once in a while, you have a rupture year where you have another group who comes in and they have a whole other voice, but that voice maybe is a little bit more indicative of what is the main conversation of the moment, the newest conversation. And so that will break and create new rupture, but you don't know that. And how could you? And also when you're inside of school or inside of an institution like that, you only have 2 years.
Yep.
So there's this weird time where you're like moving, or even when we were at Cooper, this moment of the conversation being about postmodernism, my God. And then 9/11 happens in our senior year. And
Yep.
when that happened, there was such a break and such a rupture. And I mean, I don't know how teachers were trying to teach us or how people were trying to do anything at that moment. It was, they probably shouldn't have been, actually. But the isms went out the door.
All the way. And I think, you know, to bring it back, right? Like, we're in an extreme moment of disruption at this very moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're in another breaking moment. And to think about your print, I know you know this, that I think Congress are trying to use the Klansman Act of 1871 against Trump and the rioters for the attack on January 6th, right? So that, you know, the idea of the Klansman Act, right, which was put together by Grant, because a lot of freemen who were involved in the South that were going to the Freedmen's Bureau and making complaints about the abuses by the KKK. That act that Grant passed, you know, pretty much disbanding the Klan. Of course,
period of time,
kind of stayed hidden, or whatever, you can say disbanded if you want, and then came back with great ferocity in the 20s. So in thinking about the Klansman Act, I think that our past is constantly approaching us in the rearview mirror, but we ignore its acceleration. So, like, do you think times are changing and we are coming closer to some kind of recognition of this ignored past?
Well, see, like, similar to how I think about this object being distributed, and I don't have a clear body or individual that this thing will touch, or who it's supposed to live with. But the Klansman Act also, a provision of that, a part of that, I believe, was that it was also there to protect whites who had been helping blacks as well from the Klan. It was the idea that, like, no, this isn't like, the Klan is an issue. It is affecting everyone. And, you know, and it probably, if it wasn't affecting a significant amount of white bodies, it would not have gone anywhere. So when thinking about that at this moment, I think that the framing of the conversation around what has happened with this God, with everything, is that to make it really, that it needs to be focused on the fact that it's not just simply about brown and, well, just my body and other people of color's bodies, but it's everyone's bodies, you know? And it's like, this is the thing. It's like, it's that divisive, micro managed way of seeing. It's like, no, the water is tainted.
Yep.
Everyone's getting the lead. Don't you
Yep.
get it? Like in Texas right now with that horrible infrastructure thing, and where they're basically are, you know, I have a friend right now who's texting with, and he's like, you know, power's out, power's on. His bathtub is filled with leaves, you know, from taking snow and trying to heat it up, you know, and he has kids and stuff. And it's like, and can't even drink that, you know? And it's just like, and he's a white guy. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it affects everyone.
Everyone.
It's a taint. And so it's like, that is the problem with taint. It spreads. It's like when you have, if you ever had like something rotten in the fridge when you're in college, and it affects, it off gases, and it affects, and it actually causes other things to go into the stage of starting to rot as well. So it's like, when you see that, it's like, why can't I counter punch? Why can't I use the multiple as a slow burn counter punch towards that, against that? Is how I'm seeing this piece. That's how I see the project as a whole. Is like, if I can establish them and put them into spaces and put them into homes and put them into museums or wherever they end up, that it's one little counterpoint. It's one little like rupture, crack that maybe, who knows, maybe will bear fruit. But that is like when Grant does that.
And it's like, I think another thing to talk about Texas is like, is America having to deal with its past, right? That idea of Texas having its own electric grid, right? Separate from the national grid, is a secession attitude about Texas being its own country.
Yeah.
It's like we have this separation, no government, no, and now there are repercussions to that concept idea that are damaging everyone.
Yeah. Well, I'd be like, to get into Texas and Texas history, don't let me get into the Alamo, but like, there's so many people who were the founders, who were basically people who were fleeing America or taxes or their families or creditors. Like a lot of them were deadbeats, and or what we consider a deadbeat.
Right.
And they fled, and they brought a lot of the ideas that they wanted to keep, and got rid of a lot of the accountability that they didn't want to keep. And so that is a large part of, like, I think the zeitgeist of like what is Texas. Like for my mother, who is a Texan, and don't mess with Texas and Texas pride. I mean, like they got a lot, they believe in that.
Oh, it's serious.
It's serious. I know out there right now, I may be saying something to someone that will, you know, I don't want to anger them too much, but it's simply, but it's like, yeah, but look at you now. And look at you when this happened a decade ago, and look at it when it happened before then, and look what happened before then. It's like, why not the corrective measure? Why not the corrective step? And then really what it always comes down to, like when I asked John Lewis, and I said to him, like, you know, how do you think you're going to get around Trump? How are you going to get into him? How are you going to get into this guy? And it's like, you got to follow the money. Same thing in Texas. Follow the money. I mean, there's people on, and not to get too far off the point of this print, or there are executives who are excited, calling each other about the fact that the price of oil has gone up.
Yep. Oh yeah. There's always a motive.
Yeah.
Right.
Or an opportunist. It's like, because they can't, you know, they can't control the snow, but they create an infrastructure, and they create a system that's designed up in a way that when everyone else loses, they win.
I mean, that's been the case since probably, I'd say, the middle of the situation we're dealing with now with COVID. You know, the rioting at the Capitol, and how the stock market has been skyrocketing. Right? It's like there's benefits when it makes no sense when unemployment. I think we go 800 and something thousand people filed for new unemployment. You know, and I think when it comes back to the image, what's the edition number? for this
God, I can't remember. I actually off the top of my head. Does someone
Okay.
chime in?
I'm assuming
50.
because like
50.
oh, 50, there it is.
Liz is on it, like 50. Yeah.
So 50, that's a good number because I'm thinking about this idea of consumption, but also disruption.
Yeah.
The way that this thing will move, right?
Mhm.
Whose house will it be in? Right?
Yeah.
Who will have this on their wall? Who will have this? Maybe they buy it and they have it in a folder. Who knows? Who knows what people does with art when they get it, right? It's like their responsibility. But whenever they look at this, right, there's a new kind of concept or an idea that has to come to mind when you look at that image, right? And will those eyes or will those minds try to understand and reconcile with history? Like, is my question,
Yeah. That's the beautiful part of it, is that like I don't have one answer. I don't think it sets us up in a way that there is just not one answer. And when I think about so when I did the Negro Rifle Association flag and T-shirts for an exhibition that I had here in Philadelphia maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, I knew that producing an edition shirt, I editioned them. I didn't tell people they were editioned, but they're all numbered on the inside of them. I made an edition shirt, and it was like $25. Stephanie Robinati, a really amazing person who helped me with my second book, incredible person. She was so in it with me that she's there distributing shirts. That's not
awesome.
That's not the type of person that Stephanie don't need to do that, but
Yeah.
that's what I got working for me. So people are just probably thinking it's a cash grab. Oh, this is some artist just trying to make an extra $25 off of this thing. The deal is that no, when people would buy it, they would take it in their homes, and then they'd have to reconcile with it. And they have to deal with it. Then they have to think, where am I storing this? Am I putting it in the drawer? Do I put it on a wall? Do I wear it? And some people, they would tell me that they couldn't wear it, and I would listen to them tell me why they couldn't wear it, and now it's okay to hear why they couldn't wear it. There's no real judgment in it. But I think that when it was a wearable physical thing, or had something had the potential of being wearable, the issue of like, can I walk in those steps? What art that speaks to white supremacy or tries to destroy white supremacy or try to limit white supremacy, like if something is doing it in a way that you're comfortable with, maybe that's not good. Maybe it's doing it on a low level. If it's just a wink to people to say like, I believe in this, versus saying, no, I believe in this. Because I don't think that the allyship that I need right now is part-time. I need full-time.
Yeah, absolutely full time. And I think one thing that I really love about this print, right, and it's something that I haven't seen before, is the fact that there's a burial, there's a death, right, even in the language that it's communicated in, right. Those are things that, and I think we had a conversation like this before, but we're used to seeing the bleeding and damaged Black body. We're used to seeing the torture. We're used to seeing the representation of that in a negative sense, right? No matter what kind of connotation it has to it, or what kind of intention it is to rethink the image, or why that body is being tortured, or why that body is being beaten, or whatever that is, to think about this in place and use of a burial of a Klansman is rearranging that conversation and thinking about them in that way. What does this mean for you? What does this mean for a nation? How do we view the Klansman, right? Because it really is a question. I mean, because I can say how I view them and how we view, but how does America really view the Klansman? And I think that's what's powerful about this.
Yeah, I think it's the idea of like, there's certain language or shorthand that's been placed around Black Death, and in a way in which there's a lot of shorthand around a lot of ways that we think about the Black diaspora, and it's so nuanced. It's insanely nuanced. Like, it's just, That's what half the fun of it is, how nuanced it is. You know? Almost meet somebody from a different part of the country and they're another person of color. You're like, what's it like there? You know,
Yep.
but or even part of the world. But I think that this unpacking of whiteness, this unpacking of white supremacy, it's something that I had to start giving. I had to start saying I can't do that work. Like I don't know what it's like to really walk in your shoes. And I think that the sad thing is, a big part of the game is that there's a reality that's been formed that where there a part of that reality, an essential part of that reality to function, is that there's a lack of questioning of it.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so when trying to make an object that possibly will invoke that, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm invoking rather than trying to answer it.
Exactly.
Because I have to be very clear with myself that I cannot answer it. It was not I did not construct it. I did not start it. My grandfather didn't start it. My grandmother didn't start this crap. Some group of people did, and other people helped to establish it and continue it willingly or unwillingly. But I think at a certain point, because of the way we have this level of connectivity with one another, to each other's pain, to each other's sorrow, to each other's joy, that we get to a certain point when that conversation, when that dialogue, when that debate needs to be had. It needs to be had. I don't know. See, that's the thing. See, when I start to say that, I start to become too prescriptive. I start to say, "Oh, it needs to happen in TV. It needs to happen," and I'm like, "Stop doing that work."
Yeah, because and that's the thing. And James Baldwin said something that I think is incredibly powerful. He was like, and he was talking about white America. He was like, "I as a black man know more about you than you know about me, because I have to. It's been my responsibility to protect myself that I know more about you than you know about me." And I just think that's really powerful. But in saying what you're saying is, you're in just your short description, you're trying to answer these questions in your head because you have a viewpoint that's looking at the power and seeing what they're doing. And I think this print is asking, what does white America, how do they view this? How are they going to deal with this, right?
And I would want to hear what they think. And even talking about what you were asking earlier, and you're kind of talking about the detritus and everything else in the mound, as I do other editions and forms of this, that will shift. Like there's elements of this that I already have, like sketches and drawings and painting versions of it and everything else. So it's an evolving relationship to the image. I'm not going to just reproduce the same thing, because it is not just the one same body. It's like multiple, maybe. It's like, there's many ways to kind of to engage with this, and it's something I sometimes want to sit down with, and when I do engage in it, and I start to ponder it, and I start to meditate over it. But back to that Baldwin point, that is almost an interesting tie-in to the conversation about what's happening in Indianapolis. And that asking for someone for a position to maintain the core, like white
art audience
is that, because so then I'm like, so then everything that you've been programming, and this is the thing that's happening with a lot of institutions, and they're acting and they're trying to really figure out the language structure to create the language and they'll lock it in to where, but it's like, no, it's not about language, it's about perception.
Exactly.
If you can actually shift your perception, then you wouldn't have to do that other labor. But you're holding on and you're maintaining something. You're caregiving to something that is actually an impediment. And so to say that like we're going to try to, like, we want someone who wants to uphold these core ideas. So it's like those people who come in to see that the work, their eyes will not be sullied, will not be disturbed by the few other things that we have to put on the walls, that we have to have in the space.
For the audience who might not know what we're talking about, so in the Indianapolis Art Museum, the director put out a post for a job, and I think it was for a curator. And one of the quotations in the description was that they wanted to maintain a white audience, a white art audience,
a core white audience, while thinking about diversity. It was a job for a new director, and it was the president who had put that out. Thank you, correcting. It's not
Oh,
specific to be-
also there was I knew it was going to come up. But you know, and I've heard you talk about Philip Guston a lot, but I feel like we might as well dive into it. You know, yeah.
complicated human being, not a saint, not the most you know, not maybe the best dad in the world, you know, like, but he was an artist too, you know, and there's you know, this idea, like, if you don't know the stories of like his youth, if you don't understand that he's a Jewish man and he's living in America, he's dealing in a very particular period of time, that he is, you know, he is you know, he's not down with the Klan
Exactly.
as a young person.
At all.
His work is destroyed by an organization affiliated with the Klan, and he leaves school, ends up in New York. I mean, I'm not going to give you the full-on bio of it, but like, you know, and he ends up in Mexico, he's doing murals, working with Orozco, like doing all these crazy things. And, you know, he always was a political person, in his art. And not every art object, but yes, throughout his life, he had moments. So when he's doing these and he's making this work, and for that work to be, it was questioning white supremacy. And it's like, so much, even after the fact, with the whole argument, even when Mark Godfrey put out the letter, even when other artists and people of color who worked in that catalog, which is an incredible catalog, had that conversation. Oh, I guess like Glenn Ligon isn't good enough for you in that conversation. No, Trendle Hancock ain't good enough for you.
Like, what?
No, Amy Filman's not good enough for you in that conversation. You know, so if people, he did address a lot of the stuff. He tried to, he addressed it more than others had in the past.
Oh,
and
yeah.
in that exhibition. But still, I feel then it became about all of that and about censorship and about everything else, except for let's talk about white supremacy.
Yeah, and let's talk about the work. You know, like
the work.
Work pointing to white supremacy.
When I saw those works when I was younger, and perhaps there's a part of my brain that was like, oh God, no, you know, because I was young, you know, and some of that was how I was trained to even take in that information. But when I think about what it is to be Jewish, or what it could possibly mean to be a body that looks white, or someone who could pass, and then having the conflict of that. I mean, I can't imagine the crap that you get to hear. I can't imagine. Like, I really can't. And that is and then to let us in on possibly on some of that. You know, and then to see that like there isn't many people. I mean, a lot of people paint a lot of different subjects, a lot of vases in the world. Not a lot of people really like sitting around trying to figure out this white supremacy thing.
Yeah, and I think there's only, you know, like, I mean, there are, you know, several Black artists, but there's a couple of people that I can think of, you know, in the beginning, because Archibald Motley did some pieces about the Klan, you know, did some pieces that really dealt with that. But what I wanted to get to is I wanted to ask you, like, what are some of your biggest influences as far as printmakers? Like, who are some of the people that you looked at that, like, you know, play a role in your practice, like whatever period?
I mean, of course, Henri Daumier, there's, you know, Gustave Doré, there's Goya, Charles White, large part lately, more and more Charles White, you know, Jacob Lawrence. You know, it's weird because like when you bring up Jacob Lawrence, it's just like everybody brings up Jacob Lawrence. I'm like, well, dude, have you seen?
Exactly.
Like, it's like
his work. Like, what do you?
Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, it's not. I don't say it lightly, you know. And also going back to Charles White, you know, a part of the idea for doing this print or making this thing happen in the form of a print goes back to when I was working on Black Pulp, and send out my love to IPCNY, because when we did the show there, it became a little bit more print centered, and we had some things there that were in that family, but then those things became more highlighted. And Charles White had an edition of prints that he made, and the foreword is written by Harry Belafonte, and it's this conversation about making this work accessible to people and making it accessible to people of color. and
Yep.
having this like not losing sight of a dialogue and not losing sight of the possibility for a conversation within the work. So
I think
that stuck
that
with,
the artist that you described, right?
yeah,
Thinking about access.
yeah,
Like, I think that's incredibly important to, I think about Lawrence and his series on John Brown.
yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean? Like that whole thing, he's giving you the entire story,
yeah.
and he's breaking it up and simplifying it so anybody, a child,
Mhm.
can come and look at that and take something away from it. And I think that's incredibly important, right? That
Yeah.
artists are always thinking about access and what are the conversations that can come out of this access.
Well, I was thinking about the conversation that we've been having, or like how we have talked about American history, and this is like always was a point where we connected early on.
Mhm.
But in general, like there was that the Viva Americana show, I believe that was the name of it. That was at the Whitney.
Yep.
And one of the beautiful things about that show was to see all the different artists who were working in murals, who were working in print, who are working in these kind of conversations, talking about labor, talking about class struggle, and that the narrative typically would be one where it would just get central on one group of people with one type of like cultural specificity of one element, and then from there all of that was supposed to happen and be drawn out, or for the person or an individual would have to know some of these things. But I think that what was great about that show is that they were actually allowing and establishing that these parallel conversations weren't just simply parallels, that these things were people were working with people and
Yep.
building things. And I think that's actually what's happening right now for a lot of us. It's not that every one of us is doing some kind of activist action, or not all of us are doing all the same thing. It's that a lot of us are in some way are having dialogue and having conversation and offering ideas and showing each other their work and how they're developing things and how they're developing ideas. It's kind of way I'd always wanted it to be.
Yeah, yeah, and it's an exchange of knowledge and history, right?
Yeah.
And it's also diving into what's happening now and how do we connect the now to things that we know are affecting the now, and I think that's incredibly important. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I mean,
It's with American history, right?
well, there was a thing that, and I said I kind of started kind of having this, I don't know if it's an awakening. I think it's more like a how can you be awakened to what you've already known, or how do you something comes to light. But I keep having to remember, hopefully I can say this right so people understand exactly what I'm talking about. What Trump and those people were saying and what those people at the Capitol were doing is typical of American history.
Mm-hmm. Very
What the hatred, the statements about like Mexicans, the statements about nasty women, the all of it, all of it. We would hear, some of us hear it and go like, what is this? What is this? What is this? Have you ever really sat down and listened to other like presidents' speeches?
exactly.
How and on both sides,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, even current or more recent presidents, or even or current. And so what we are talking about often in the arts, what we are talking about with each other is the freak condition, is not the norm, which is not what we want, what we are desiring, what we're trying to put into check is not normal actually. And I mean, when I say that we're normal, it's problematic, but it's like we have to understand that when we come to the condition of someone like a Rush Limbaugh and we're saying like, how can you say that? That's insane. You're a horrible person. Yes, true. But that at the same time is a reality that has been long established,
Exactly.
it has been litigated. It has been,
Place. It's not. It didn't just happen all of a sudden. People were like, "Whoa, I got this crazy idea about white nationality and racism and ensuing propaganda to make people riot." And it didn't just.
yeah. And so when making and working in the multiple, or when I look at art history, when I look at individuals who've been able to operate and use the multiple to an effect to talk around political movements or change, Emory Douglas, like thinking through that space, I I remember sometimes debating with people, whether or not like Goy's prints actually had an effect on people. And I'm like, well, maybe it didn't stop the war that he was in, but he
Mhm.
cataloged something so we wouldn't forget that that occurred there, that it didn't just become word of mouth, that we have some sense of like the bodies and the people and the suffering that occurred in that moment. And then those who possibly, in the case of Emory Douglas, like the struggle and the people trying to create a language and a dialogue and a network of people across the country to stand up for something. And sometimes they need a visual representation to align them.
Mhm.
So that's why I feel making something like this is valid. That's why I believe and why I know, even though what I believe in and what I want to create is actually not possibly normal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think it, it comes from a place of investigation, right? It comes from a
Yeah.
place of investigation and knowledge, right? And using certain means and things that you're inspired by, right? Depicted in a language
Mhm.
that I think, like I said, when I talk about access, right? Used in a language that people can say, "Whoa, look at those lines! Whoa, like look at that color!
Yeah.
Like the drawing is really, really beautiful. Let
Mhm.
me take this in, and then what?"
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that happens after, right? The kind of consumption of it. It's like
Well,
as you stare at it, then what? What are you
well,
gonna?
that is something I think that a lot of people probably now, after the last year or so being at home so much, and if they do have art, if they're lucky enough to have art in their lives, that they will watch things die on the wall, meaning they'll see things that they thought had something and they actually have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And and then some things they thought were nothing will actually be the everything. So it's like I think that when making work, and something I try to talk to students about, or and then something I try to hold myself to in my own mind, is when I'm making something, it's not just simply for the fact that it's illustrative. And most people are usually surprised when they see my work in person, because it isn't, because I'm so into it being in the world with you,
Yep.
and it being in your life. So when it does that work, I wanted you to, I want you to feel it. I want you to, there's nothing better. I have a couple paintings that we own from friends. And when I look at them sometime, I can connect with their thinking. I can connect with their intention. I can see their curiosity sometimes, why when they took a risk or a chance somewhere. And I might even, I smiled to myself. It's a beautiful thing. Art can be an extremely beautiful thing.
Yeah.
When
No,
it
100%. And I think what you said is like, that's something I mean, I have been looking at the walls a lot more, especially in this time. And I think that's something that people are like you said, consistently thinking over, like, what do I have on my wall now?
Well, the way that, like, let's say, not to swing it too much towards you, but but like the way that you've been painting recently respects that time, and
Mm-hmm,
it respects a slow eye, and it
mm-hmm,
respects a slow burn.
mm-hmm,
And I really love that. I mean, if now, to be honest, when I'm looking at art, I'm always looking for the thing that is, does it have a slow burn? Is
mm-hmm.
there more there than I thought? Is there stuff to unpack here? Do I want to stay here? Or is it just saying, hey, I'm here, check me out, keep moving?
Exactly. And I think that's, we can talk about the piece that's showing on the screen right now. We can talk about the piece behind you, but like that's what your work does, right? I think what's wonderful about your work too is there's an immediacy to it by the way that it's described and the way that it's depicted. And then once you go in, you find these small moments. You'll find these multitude of moments happening all at once that you can kind of go in and dive in. And that's why I asked you about, it's like, whoa, this is something I didn't notice before. The banana, the trash bag, the newspaper,
Yeah.
like those little things that you find, right? After you start to kind of get into the image. Yeah, I guess the time now is, does anybody, because we got it through the chat, have any questions for Mark?
You see any there? Just you pull them up, Mario. Ask me.
Okay, so here's one. What is the work behind Mark?
Oh, okay. So this one is called Boys Will Be Boys. And it's It's of the Capitol City riot. I mean, the Capitol City, the Capitol riots in DC. And yeah, I'm in the way of it. But to the point of like, you know, how, if you are curious about the piece, yeah, I mean, a lot of it has to do with like what happened that day, but it also has to do with the labor of the people who do the cleanup, you know, people of color, people of a certain class, not just people of color, but a lot of people who are, you know, their job is, my father was a janitor for a period of time and worked in sanitation. You know, many people in my family have worked in sanitation and or been like homemakers for others and that type of labor. And it's like we forget about them. And when you have people on one side fighting for their freedom and putting excrement on the walls, and then there's people who are their job, their livelihood is to then to clean that up and to deal with that mess. Then I also wanted to have like politicians on the side, like hiding underneath underneath a desk. I try to use the actual desk that they have in Congress, or in the Senate, actually in the Senate. And but I think about, you know, that moment of shock and that moment of rupture, and how quickly that turned into, you know, people falling into line, and to what end, you know. And it's like, you want to be beholden to this horrible person. I mean, that is how powerful. I mean, that is like, that is why I can't answer these questions, because that is how powerful it is, that you could have the chance, the full opportunity to take a yoke off your neck like that, and you instead, you slide it back on willingly, gleefully.
It's you know, that's one of those things, and I think that's why your work is so important. But you know, those are, I mean, that's what we're dealing with right now as a nation. You know, is like, yo, so you saw,
You lived. You lived.
like, or you saw a young white man, a teenager, shoot people in the middle of the street,
Yeah.
and walk away from it.
Yeah.
And there's no questions about that. Like, are we not?
Get bail, throw up white supremacy signs, hang out in a bar, possibly drinking underage, and then you can't put them back in jail. You know, it's just like.
All right, so let me
ask another question.
I want to make sure we get most of them. So you got Lonnie Johnson shouting love from the 305.
Oh, that's my girl, Lonnie. Hi, Lonnie. How you doing?
And one of the questions we have is, let's see, there's this, I think it's a newspaper in your print, and it says "Words under the garbage. What does it say?" I'm not sure if that's in your
in the print. I can't exactly. I don't. I was just looking at it when it was up, and I was trying to remember exactly what it said. If I flipped it upside down, I probably could make it out. I might have. It said something. I think it was something actually might have been an actual headline that day. A lot of the things that I make, sometimes I make. I when I'm really in my normal zone, even if I'm teaching and doing things like that, I usually can make a drawing a day. And if I make you know, just like 22 by 30 thing, but when I do that, it usually has some reference to something that happened in the news that day. And it helps me sometimes, it's good for me to remember, because I have like pieces that I did, like when the first impeachment happened. Yes, the first one. And like when and I, you know, come on. The first impeachment of him a year ago, before the pandemic.
Yeah.
It was good for me to do it, because I could like see, and I was reading the statement that I, you know, lifted from some of the, like, I think something Nancy Pelosi had said. And yeah, I just kind of, I build these things, and I sometimes put a little bit of history in them, or I write on the back of them something that is particular about that day. I'm sorry, I can't like just easily give you an answer to that.
No, we got it. But we got another question. This actually has been asked twice. I know the answer, but I want you to explain it, Mark. So could you expound on your slow burn concept and how he encapsulates layers of meaning in his work?
Okay, so the slow burn concept was something that actually came up when something like Rob Stewart said about a painting I made when we were in grad school. I started making these black on black paintings. It was a take on black on black hard edge abstraction in painting. And I was thinking about how do we slow down the eye. So I was doing images of Benjamin Franklin, And the idea was to simply get you to slow down and to maybe see him in a different light, to think about the conversation that you have with others when looking at him in this way. And a part of that also had come from about 17 thinking about a lot of the painters that both of us look at, turn early American painting of the forefathers or the founding fathers. And just, I kept thinking in my head while living in the Northeast, I'm like, well, how the hell are these people in their 60s and they look this good? Because I see people who in the North and they don't look that good. Their skin's like, it's not, the wind, the cold and the wind has done its work. So so I was thinking about that too, like the what a painting can do, how it can create a lie, how it can create a mystery, how it can create all these things. And then that point, I was trying to make these paintings that had a one-to-one body relationship. So when you were in front of them, slowly it would burn itself physically into your eye, that you would, all of a sudden the color would register and you could see them. Mm-hmm. So that principle, where I think with a lot of students or a lot of people, when you're younger and you're making art and you have all these ideas and you want to get them all into everything that you do, trying to figure out the balance and the rhythm for me meant I had to figure out, how do I extend time visually inside of something? And how do I keep you there so that I can get everything I need to say out?
Yep.
So that was one part of it. It was like, I'm going to figure out, how do I slow down time in an image? How do I capture time in an image? And a lot of that was like looking at print. A lot of that meant looking at people who had created imagery in a time, in a period of time where that's what people would do in the evening, was sit down and look at a series of prints perhaps. So why not think about what time meant for them, and can I actually use that? Take it.
Yeah. And I think also to kind of just add on to that, like, because when I think about a slow burn as an artist, right, as an image maker, I want a person to stand in front of my work for as long as possible. Sure. I mean, if you are standing in front of that work for 30 minutes, I've done something very right. Okay. So it's like, how do you read the work versus just the first impact of an image, and how do you stay with that image? So that's incredibly important. So we got a question, we might be able to do, maybe this will be the last one or another one. So for both Mario and Mark, what possibility future do you see for the Black experience? Will the work of POCs forever wrestle the past through inclusivity?
I don't know.
You go.
I wish I could say I had one particular future that I could see for this. It's really we're the music makers and the dreamers of dreams. I mean, it's like it is all, because there is the time period that I live in, and I can think back. I guess my answer to this is, when I think about what that may have meant for someone 2 generations ago, it's a very different thing.
Yeah,
there's a lot of things in play right now that I don't think that even my father's generation could possibly have imagined. Yeah. So I can't say. I mean, I hope it's a bright one. I hope it's a great one. I hope it's one where we really do shed. I think I've seen change in people. I've seen change in my own life, and I've seen it in my friends. I've seen it in the people I care about. I've seen it even in my enemy. I've seen it in a lot of different places. So I know it's possible, but it takes work.
Yeah, so I'll answer this like this, right? I'll say this, because I think a lot of times as Black people, we're pivoted into a subscript or a subterranean area or a section over this side or that side.
Yeah.
So my Black experience is not the same as everyone else's Black experience, right? I'm a human being just like anybody else. So my Black experience, or my experience with Blackness, is probably different from Mark's. There are some things that connect us together, but we have differences in how we're raised, how we grow up, all those kind of things. Yeah. So I can't answer for everybody's experience. I can only answer for my own. And then when it comes to just thinking about what we will have to deal with in the future, I don't know. I have no idea. But what I can say is that whatever artist is creating in the future, whatever they're doing, I think the possibilities are wide open. Not every Black artist has to deal with some kind of wrestling with the past or an idea of discrimination or whatever that looks like. There might be artists that don't want to deal with that at all, right? And they're able to do that as human beings. So that's what I want to say, is that, my experience is going to be different from from anybody else.
So I hope that it just means in the future means that things are just wider and that there's more freedom to create and control what you make and to own you and be accepted and for your work to be discussed. That you don't have to come in with like a direct, clear lineage for everyone so that they can like just throw you into it. I think that the conversation I'm having a lot more with my students and what I'm learning about their culture and what I'm learning about their identities is broadening my understanding of reality so much more. And I'm blessed for that. I see the positive in it.
Let me see if there's, because I think we're at the end.
Yeah, I'll take one more, and then we probably have to go. They're like, "Yo, we only got a bandwidth of
time." Oh, I got a question by Katie. So, what is the work behind Mario? Okay, so that's this.
Thanks, Katie. Can't hear you. You ain't mic'd like that, buddy.
So yeah, this is this huge piece here that I have. But really, this painting is about now and it's about the past. It's called the Great Reckoning, and this horse represents. So when we think about the white horse, we think about a majestic horse. We think about people who can control that horse, and we think about a level of optimism or majesty. But when we think about the Bible, we think about the 4 horsemen. The white horse is written by death. So in thinking in that way, this horse, and of course the flag that's underneath it, represents that aspect of America. The saddle blanket that's on top of the horse is actually Robert E. Lee's saddle blanket. White horses were used by a lot of American presidents that owned slaves. So Andrew Jackson, Stonewall Jackson, of course, who fought in the Civil War. And this soldier over here represents optimism in my mind for America. And that's actually my 3rd great uncle who fought in the Civil War. Way in the back, you can see a very, very small American flag. And it's that concept, right? The idea or the dream of America. The thing that the experimentation of America that we're still working towards is very, very distant. So that's, as a whole, it's a lot more going on, but there you go.
Danielle asked you a question too.
Okay, so this will be the last one. Is it exhausting as Black artists that your work has to always speak to the times? White artists don't have to do that. Now, there's 2 ways I think about this, because I believe that white artists should do that. I believe that, I believe they should. I believe they should try to tackle some of these issues, and some of them do, right? But I also think it's up to an artist to decide what they want to make, why, where, and how. I think for myself, it's just I'm working through my experiences.
Yeah.
Those experiences happen to do with a lot of the injustices that we are facing, because it's my lived experience. So that's what's in front of me, and that's what's around me, and that's what's kind of coming into my work. It's not a forced thing. So
I mean, for me, I would say, yes, I agree with you that I think everyone should on some level be able to engage in the conversation about what's happening right now in the moment. And maybe if it's not even highlighted in their work, but just hopefully in their lives, they can actually do that. But for me, it was like, I kind of didn't want to do some of the stuff that I ended up doing in my work, but it wasn't because I felt I was being trapped into it. It was more like I had this calling. And it just kept calling me. And I was like, no, please, I don't want to do this. I don't want to have to do this. But it was like everything I read, everything I was interested in, all the books I was reading, everything that I cared about. And I think this is something that a lot of people don't get, is that with artists, you might sometimes look at an artist and you'd be like, oh man, that's some hokey stuff. I can't believe that's what they do. And it's like, well, actually, that might just be what they like. That might just actually be something they like, because it's extremely hard to maintain an art practice. So when you're an artist, you typically, the things that you don't really care for that much, they shed away. You can only keep that up for so long. So when you're working as an artist, you find that you actually start to gravitate in the things that enrich you, the things that you care about, the deeper well of what it is that you give a darn about, where you draw your water from. That is where you will go. And
Yep.
and then as you go down that road, it's funky enough is that you'll meet other people who are on that same path, and you'll have your different conversations, and you trade knowledge and you offer knowledge. And it's a very beautiful thing when it actually occurs. All right.
All right, I think that is the end of, we might have somebody else come on screen. But thank you, Mark. This is amazing.
Thank you, Mario. Always, always. I love you, man. Thank you so much for this. Thank you.
Yeah, Mark, Mario, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. It's been so inspiring, and I feel like, I have a lot to think about, but I have even more to think about now, which is amazing. And Mark, we're so, again, grateful to have been able to produce this print with you, and it really should be sold out today.
Yeah, I hope so. but I want to say thank you again to NADA, and I want to say thank you. When some organizations you go to with a project and you say to them, like, I want to do something, and it's a part of something larger, it's a part of something else that I'm doing, you'd be surprised how often people say, no, I don't want to have a hand in that. Mm-hmm. But when I said it here, there was not even a question, and it was like, if anything, it actually energized them even more. That it was a part of a larger conversation or a larger project that I want to do. So I just want to say thank you to you and your entire team, and to Elizabeth or Liza, and to Max as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, you two.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for being here.
All right.
Bye, everyone.